Hey y'all, Dixie here. Today I want to talk to you about 5 big mistakes that I've made while thru hiking. Now, despite my mistakes, my AT and PCT thru hiking attempts were successful, but I'm hoping that sharing this information with y'all might be helpful whether you're planning to thru hike or just going on a shorter backpacking trip. Mistake number 1 is not hiking in rough terrain. So when I say rough terrain, I'm referring to extremely rocky or very steep, just some terrain that wouldn't be optimal for setting up camp if you needed to. So for you hammockers, that might be a place where it's all of those things and also no trees. My first experience with this was coming down Mount Moosilauke after it had rained and again in the dark. So if you're familiar with Mount Moosilauke in the White Mountains, it is extremely steep when you're descending it going northbound. There are these wooden wedges that are anchored into rock faces, and if you think about like a deck on a house, how it can get that algae on it and be real slimy, that's how those steps were. So it was pretty scary coming down in the dark like that. There was basically nowhere to set up camp if I wanted to. There was one shelter coming down, but I passed that up. And then after I told myself I would not hike in the Whites anymore, I ended up doing it again. And this time the terrain didn't look quite as bad, but ended up being extremely rocky, and there was nowhere that I could have set up camp. So I just had to keep pushing through. So from those experiences on the PCT, I made sure to look ahead at either, a guidebook or I used gut hooks, but just to make sure that there was somewhere that I could set up camp if I needed to, because it will have designated camping areas in gut hooks and oftentimes in guidebooks. So, that way if you decide that the conditions aren't great for hiking at night, you can always ditch out and set up camp. Now, I love night hiking, but I'm just saying if you're gonna do it, make sure that there is a plan B if you decide you're not really up for it. Mistake number 2 is not taking all precautions to make sure I don't get hypothermia. I'm normally pretty good at making sure that my clothes, my sleeping bag, and all of those things that will keep me warm and dry at night stay warm and dry while I'm hiking in the rain. But on the PCT, I hit the Cascades and it was extremely cold weather at night. It was raining often during the days, sometimes snowing. It was like a different kind of cold that I had never felt before. But a lot of times while you're moving and you're hiking, even if you're kind of cold, your body is staying warm enough, especially when you start to go up a hill. So I'd gotten to a climb and I was pushing real hard, and I'd had my raincoat on and my hood on. And yeah, you're gonna sweat a little bit, and sometimes the rain's gonna get through anyway, whether it works down through your neck or up through your rain pants or your sleeves or whatever. So no, you're not gonna stay completely dry. But the biggest mistake that I made was taking my hood off to cool off instead of like rolling up my sleeves or, taking my rain pants off to cool off. And my hair got absolutely soaked. Now this is late afternoon, right before I'm about to climb in my tent and go to bed for the night with soaking wet hair in below 30-degree temperatures. So that just wasn't very smart. And when I finally set up my tent, I was shivering so badly. Got in my tent, I was extremely exhausted. I climbed in my sleeping bag after changing into my dry clothes, and then I passed out. I didn't even take the time to cook. And one thing that's really important for hypothermia is making sure that your body has enough calories to actually warm up. So it's a really good idea to try to get some warm liquids in you, especially warm sugary liquids like hot chocolate, and then also to eat something. So because I was so cold and so tired and I was just shivering, I climbed in my sleeping bag with the wet hair and, balled up and didn't eat. So one thing I should have done is kept my hood on my raincoat. Yeah, my hair might have been a little sweaty, but it wouldn't have been just soaked with freezing cold water. And second, I should have eaten as soon as I got dried off and warm. So I'm just saying, you might think, yeah, you're taking all the precautions, but just sometimes thinking ahead and not going, right this moment I'm hot and I don't care if my hair is soaking wet and I have freezing cold water on me. Sometimes you just have to think ahead for the future, and when I climb in my sleeping bag in an hour or two, I'm going to be freezing and my hair's not going to dry all night long. So not only do I think it's important to think about those things, but if you're not familiar with hypothermia, I highly recommend that before you get out in the backcountry for several days on end, that you look it up, because you might think that to have hypothermia it has to be, freezing cold and icy and snowy outside, but that's not necessarily true. Mistake number 3 is wearing my trail runners too long because they still have decent tread. So the trail for me is less about fashion and more about the functionality of my gear. So if my trail runners have a few holes on the top of them and I can see my socks, I mean, that's more ventilation, right? And especially if the trail runner has some tread left on the bottom of it, why would I want to spend more money than I have to? But unfortunately, I learned the hard way that once my trail runners hit about 500 miles and the support starts to go, because my arch will start flexing more than it has to, I end up having issues with plantar fasciitis. Now, obviously not all feet are made the same, so this may not be an issue for you. I know that there are those lucky hikers that can push their trail runners to almost 1,000 miles and never have any issues, but if you are experiencing pain from plantar fasciitis, then this might be something that's worth a try. Mistake number 4 is thinking that black bears are sweet and cuddly. Not really. I didn't exactly think that, but if you had seen the way I acted when I saw my first black bear on the AT, you would have thought that I actually thought they were teddy bears. I actually did a whole video on this in itself, but this is still just one of those mistakes that I immediately think of when I think of the dumb things I've done on trail. So basically, we had been warned about an aggressive bear in the area, and you could hike through the area, but you couldn't camp there. So I was hiking through, and I was with a group of folks, thank goodness, that had encountered bears before. And I was scooping some water out of a spring, and this bear just started heading right towards us. Now, if you've ever seen a bear out in the woods, chances are you saw the butt end running away from you. But in this instance, it wasn't afraid of us, and it kept coming towards us. And for some reason, I guess because of my lack of experience, I thought that, that was okay.
What's up, man?
And so the bear got closer and closer and closer. And finally it kind of stood up and looked at me, and we made eye contact, and I looked at it and I kind of crouched down and I said, "Hey, darling," as if it was, a sweet little puppy or something. And he got mad and bluff charged me, and I started to run away, which is not what you're supposed to do when a bear runs at you, because that triggers their chase instinct and they might actually come after you, and the bluff charge can turn into an actual attack. So luckily, the group I was with told me, don't do that, don't run. And I turned around and we all faced the bear together. I kind of held up my trekking poles and we tried to make ourselves look big. And the bear finally kind of stood down and, he was close enough that I could see the hair was up on the back of his neck. But anyway, I'm just saying that wherever you're going to be, it's worth it to take a look at what wildlife is in that area and then kind of read up on how you're supposed to behave when you encounter different types of wildlife that might be where you're backpacking. And although I had read up a little bit on black bears and how you're supposed to interact with them, I definitely did not implement that. But I've seen about 10 bears since then, and all when I've been alone, and I definitely have improved how I behave when I see them. Mistake number 5 is being careless with water crossings. This one's actually still pretty fresh for me because it was during my thru hike of the PCT last year in 2017. Now on the AT in 2015, I did have some fords, some rivers I had to go across, but it was nothing like what I saw in the Sierra Nevada in 2017 on the PCT. And the main reason that the rivers were so outrageous and just very dangerous is because it was such a high snow year. And once it becomes summertime and the snow starts melting, all of that water has to go somewhere. So a lot of times these areas are flooded, and it's just so much more water coming through these channels than what is normally there. There were a lot of water crossings through the Sierra Nevada, and most of the time I was pretty smart about it. I would check upstream or downstream to see if there was a better place to cross, somewhere a little safer, maybe a log to go across instead of submerging my body in freezing cold water. I did all of the things that I was supposed to do most of the time. There was one instance where we had to swim across a river, but it was pretty wide. The water was moving fairly slow. Some of the guys were able to go through and hold their packs above their heads while they did it, but I'm not as tall as some of the folks that I was hiking with, and I knew that it was going to be too deep for me to actually walk across, so I knew I was going to have to swim. Now, what I did was put my pack on my back and doggy paddle across. But the problem with that is the weight of the pack could, actually push my face down towards the water, and that's just not really safe to have that weight like that. So what exactly is the safest way to do this? Well, people could argue about that all day long. I can say that the safest way to do it is not what I did. I could have tried to float the pack on an air mattress, like my blow up sleeping pad. Didn't really want to lose that. Probably still wouldn't have done that in the future. The pack that I used was more or less waterproof, at least for some time. It's not gonna get completely submerged as soon as I put it in the water. Now for packs that aren't waterproof or, you know, highly water resistant, most of the time you're gonna have some kind of liner in it anyway to keep your stuff from getting wet. So if you've got like a compactor bag or a bag liner, something like that, make sure to put all the things that you don't want in there so they don't get wet, and then roll it down. Now, the reason that I would suggest putting the compactor bag inside with all of your stuff instead of putting it on the outside of the pack and tying it up is because that compactor bag is going to be more fragile than the material that your pack is made out of. So if it bumps on rocks or limbs or anything like that, it could tear a hole in that bag and then get everything soaked anyway. There's gonna be a little bit of buoyancy to your pack and that bag that you've got in there or liner. So a lot of people think that the best way to do it is to, you know, waterproof your pack as best as you can and then swim and have one hand on it and go across. I have seen videos of people actually putting the pack on the front of them and laying across it, so it's kind of like a floating device for them and paddling across. People have also talked about having somebody that crosses ahead of you if you're with other people, taking the end of cord or a rope or something like that and going across with it as they cross. And then you can tie the other end to your pack and have them pull it across for you and then go across without your pack. I'm not gonna tell you how to do it. I'm not gonna tell you what is the safest way. I suggest reading up on what to do in that situation and then deciding what works best for you. But I will say that although some of y'all may have seen me in the video where I swam across with the pack on my back, that probably was not the safest option. But probably the biggest mistake that I made as far as being careless with river crossings goes was right after mile 800, and that was trying to cross White Fork by myself. So I had been hiking around people, but some of the folks had gotten ahead, and one guy had ended up turning around and going back and decided that he didn't want to hike in the Sierra Nevada anymore and he was heading back. So I was out there all alone, and I told myself and I told my mom that I would not do anything extremely dangerous alone. It was in the afternoon and I was trying to rush to get to the bottom of the next pass so I could cross it early the next morning. But I came across White Fork, which wasn't really supposed to be anything extremely dangerous according to gut hooks, but that was for a normal snow year. So when I got there late afternoon after hiking all day and my body was tired and I saw how raging that river was, I should have stopped right then and set up camp and decided not to cross. But because I'm a stubborn person and because I really wanted to make those miles, I knew downstream that there was no better crossing because it was basically like a rock channel, and if you go down there, there just was nowhere to cross. You'd be jumping off and just dying. So I tried to go upstream a ways and look up there, and the same thing, it was kind of like rock cliffs and there just was no better place to cross. So I decided to come back down to the trail and cross right there. And as I started going, I realized that I was probably biting off more than I could chew. And I just kept taking steps and kept taking steps, even though in my mind I was going, what are you doing? You're an idiot. You know, if you fall down, you are going to die because there is nothing downstream except literally a rock channel. No bushes, no branches, no nothing to pull myself out. And then I still kept taking steps. And I got about halfway across and I felt my legs kind of start to give. And it was the strangest feeling because part of me just wanted to just give up. I was so tired, I was so exhausted, and I was just so angry with the situation and at myself. And, you know, it was just that moment of just like, gosh, I'm tired of fighting this. And then something in me was just like, you know, survival mode kicking in. And I was like, no, I am not falling down. I am not giving in. So I turned around and just, I don't know how I managed to turn back around and fight my way back to the other side. And I grabbed onto a bush and pulled myself up out of the water. And then I just sat there and started crying. And I felt like such an idiot. I was so ashamed of myself for putting myself in that danger. For what? So I decided to set up my tent right there on the trail and, you know, just try to relax and eat some food and hope that, you know, somebody would show up that could hopefully cross with me the next morning. And luckily, 4 of the most awesome people that I hung out with on trail did show up that night, and we became friends and we all crossed it safely the next day. But the thing is I learned a really big lesson at that point, and it's, yeah, get out there and challenge yourself and, you know, yeah, enjoy nature and push yourself to the limits. But, you know, a thru hike is not worth dying for. So if there was a point that I just felt like it was really something that I shouldn't or couldn't do alone that I needed to stop and wait for somebody else, and that's okay. I have a link that is in the video information, so where it says show more below, there's gonna be a link to another YouTube video from one of my fellow hikers in 2017. They went through about a week and a half before I did, and several of them crossed together, linking arms across White Fork, and one of the girls ended up falling down and they had to pull her out. But I want y'all to check that out, and you should be able to look at that and say, I'm not doing that alone. Now, given the water was a little bit more shallow whenever I went through, but it was still definitely rushing, and it was still too powerful for me to try after being tired all day and to do it alone. So again, I wanted to share some of my biggest mistakes with you because I just want to make a point that nature can be very enjoyable, it can be extremely rewarding, it can build your confidence, but it can also humble you and strip some of that away too. I'm not telling you this so that you'll be afraid or you won't want to get out there and enjoy things for yourself, but I'm just saying that you do have to respect nature. I'm a big advocate of not letting fear stop you and keep you in the house and not enjoying the things that you love to do. However, I'm just saying that while you're out there, make sure that you trust your instincts more than anything. I think that that would be the biggest takeaway from all of my experiences, is if you think like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this, then maybe you shouldn't. Again, I'm not trying to scare y'all. I just wanted to share some of the things that I have done that weren't necessarily very bright. So hopefully y'all can avoid making those same mistakes. And if you've got any questions about these particular instances or anything like that, please feel free to leave those in the comment section below. And if you found this video helpful or any other videos on the channel and you would like to support the work I do, you can do that at no additional cost to you by visiting dixieaz.com next time you do your shopping on Amazon. And with that, thank y'all so much, and we will see y'all next time.